Rain in this city doesn't cleanse, it drowns. Mara Collins thought she was just surviving another shift, scraping by on hope that had worn thin years ago. She didn't know the pale child collapsed beside the payphone was the heir to an immortal throne. She made one call to a number written in elegant ink on a dying boy's wrist. She didn't call for help. She called a king. And when Lord Cale Draven answers, "If my son dies, so will you." The neon sign above Wong's all-night laundromat buzzed with a dying electric hum, casting sickly green light across rain-slicked pavement. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday, the kind of hour that belonged to no one and nothing, suspended between the weight of yesterday and the dread of tomorrow. Hey, story family! Before we dive into today's incredible tale, I need you to do me a quick favor. If you love stories about ordinary people thrust into extraordinary worlds, hit that subscribe button right now. And drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from, because I love seeing our global community grow. Today's story is about a poor girl, a dying child, and one phone call that changes everything. Trust me, you do not want to miss this. So get comfortable, maybe grab a snack, and let's begin this journey together. Mara Collins wrung out a cleaning rag over the industrial sink, her knuckles bone-white from cold and cracked from cheap soap. At 24, she looked 30. Poverty carved lines that time alone could never manage, settling exhaustion into the hollows beneath her eyes and pulling her mouth into a tight, defensive line. She checked her coat pocket for the third time. $18.60. That was her take for a double shift, cleaning, sorting, folding other people's lives while her own came apart at the seams. Not enough for rent, which was already a week late. Maybe enough for instant noodles and bus fare. Maybe. Lock up when you're done. Mrs. Wong called from the back office, already counting the register. And don't forget the back door. Last girl left it open. I've got it, Mrs. Wong. Mara's voice came out rough, scraped raw from exhaustion. She grabbed her coat, a thrift store cast off 3 sizes too big, the lining torn and restitched with uneven thread, and pushed through the glass door into the knife-edge wind. The rain came down in sheets, icy and unforgiving, turning the street into a river of reflected neon and oil-slick rainbows. She pulled her collar up and started toward the bus stop. That's when she saw the shape on the ground. It was crumpled beside the old payphone near the corner, half hidden behind a rusted dumpster and a stack of collapsed cardboard boxes. At first, Mara thought it was trash. Then the trash moved. A sound cut through the rain. Small, choked, barely human. Mara stopped. Every instinct the city had beaten into her screamed to keep walking. Curiosity in this neighborhood got you hurt, robbed, or worse. But the sound came again. A child's sound. She stepped off the sidewalk, her worn sneakers splashing through puddles. "Hello!" Her voice barely carried over the rain. The shape shifted. A small face turned upward, pale as porcelain, framed by dark curls plastered to a too delicate skull. It was a boy no older than 7. He was wearing formal clothing, a velvet jacket with silver buttons and embroidered cuffs, the kind of thing Mara had only seen in museum paintings. But it was torn, soaked through, caked in grime. "Hey," Mara said, dropping to her knees without thinking, ignoring the cold water soaking through her jeans. "I've got you. You're okay." The boy didn't speak. His eyes were too large, too dark, pools of something ancient staring through her rather than at her. He was shivering so violently his teeth clacked together, but his skin, when Mara touched his shoulder, was ice-cold in a way that had nothing to do with weather. "Can you stand?" she asked gently, reaching for his hand.
He tried.
His small body pushed against the wet concrete, but his legs buckled immediately. He gasped a sharp, wrong sound and collapsed back down. "Okay, don't move," Mara soothed, her hands hovering over him, searching for injuries. "Where are your parents, sweetheart?" The boy didn't answer. Instead, he thrust his left arm toward her with desperate urgency. He pushed back the sodden velvet sleeve. There, written in precise, elegant ink on impossibly pale skin, was a phone number. Nothing else. No name. No message. Just 10 digits in a hand that looked like calligraphy. Mara stared at it. A chill that had nothing to do with the rain crawled down her spine. This wasn't a lost child. This was a contingency, a plan, a last resort. She pulled her cracked phone from her pocket, her hands trembling as she dialed, looking down at the boy's terrified face. Ring. Ring. The line connected. No greeting. Just silence. Heavy, oppressive, like the moment before lightning strikes. Hello. Mara's voice cracked. Who is this? The voice on the other end was a low baritone, impossibly calm, impossibly cold. It sounded like velvet wrapped around a blade, like winter given breath. Mara swallowed hard. I found a boy. Outside Wong's laundromat on 7th. He's hurt. Silence. 3 heartbeats of absolute nothing. Describe him. Not a request. A command. Dark hair. Maybe 7 years old. He's wearing fancy clothes. Velvet. And he has your number written on his arm. Is he breathing? Yes, but something's wrong. His skin is freezing. He tried to stand but collapsed. He can't. Stay exactly where you are. The voice cut through her words like a scalpel. Do not hang up. Do not move him. If he is not there when I arrive, or if there is a single new mark on him that wasn't there before, the pause was more terrifying than any threat. I will find you, and you will beg me to make it quick. The line didn't disconnect. It simply waited. Mara stared at the phone, her heart slamming against her ribs like something trapped and dying. Beg me to make it quick. Those weren't empty words. She could feel the truth of them in her bones. Who are you? She whispered to the boy. She pulled off her coat and wrapped it around his small frame, pulling him into her lap to shield him from the rain. He buried his face against her shirt, his small hands clutching the fabric with strength that felt wrong for his size. They waited. 5 minutes. Then 10. Mara's mind raced with possibilities. Run, stay, call the police, disappear. But she looked at the boy's too pale face, at the way his breathing hitched and stuttered, and knew she couldn't leave him alone in the rain to die. Then the street exploded with silence. 3 black vehicles materialized from the darkness, not with sirens or screeching tires, but with the eerie quiet of predators who didn't need to announce themselves. They were sleek, expensive, utterly wrong for this neighborhood. They glided to the curb with precision, blocking off the street in a practiced formation. Doors opened in perfect unison. Men emerged, 6 of them, dressed in dark suits that gleamed wet in the neon light. They moved with inhuman grace, taking positions around the alley entrance. Their eyes reflected light like animals. Mara gasped instinctively, curling her body around the boy. Don't hurt him. The men didn't acknowledge her. They formed a perimeter, their backs to her, a wall of flesh and shadow. Then the rear door of the center vehicle opened slowly. A man stepped out. He didn't carry an umbrella, but the rain seemed to hesitate before touching him, as if even water knew better. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with a build that suggested coiled strength beneath a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Mara had earned in her entire life. His hair was dark, pulled back to reveal a face of impossible, terrible beauty. High cheekbones, a sharp jaw, and eyes. His eyes were the color of blood and winter storms, ancient and utterly inhuman. Lord Cale Draven. Mara didn't know the name, but she knew power when she saw it. It radiated from him like heat from a star, beautiful and devastating. He walked toward her, his expensive shoes silent on wet concrete. His gaze found the boy in her arms, and for one fractured second, the mask cracked. Raw, agonizing fear flickered across his face before iron controls slammed back into place. Silas. His voice was surprisingly soft, devastatingly gentle. The boy in her arms stirred. Father. Cale Draven dropped to his knees in the gutter, ruining a suit worth thousands without a second's hesitation. His hands hovered over the boy, afraid, actually afraid, to touch him. I'm here, he whispered. I have you now. Then his eyes lifted to Mara. Up close, those eyes dissected her. They stripped away every defense, every secret, every lie she'd ever told herself. They saw her poverty, her fear, her exhaustion, and weighed her soul in a single glance. "You called," he said. Yes. He was lying here." Cale nodded once. He scooped Silas up with impossible gentleness, mindful of the boy's fragile state. "Alaric," he said, his voice cutting through the rain without rising. One of the guards turned. "My lord, have the healers prepared." "Now." "Yes, my lord." Cale turned to walk away, Silas clinging to his neck. Then he stopped. He turned back to Mara, who was still kneeling in the gutter, shivering in her thin shirt, rain streaming down her face. "Get in the car," he said quietly. Mara blinked. "What?" "I need to go home. I have work in the morning." Cale didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You have seen my son. You have seen my face. You have touched what is mine." His eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. "You are coming with me." "I didn't see anything," Mara said, scrambling backward until her spine hit the brick wall of the laundromat. "I just helped him. Please, please, I just want to go home." Cale gestured with 2 fingers. 2 guards moved toward her, their movements fluid and terrifying. Mara didn't resist as the guards closed in. What would be the point? They moved like shadows given form, and she was just a girl who cleaned other people's laundry for $18 a shift. But as one guard reached for her arm, Silas made a sound, a thin, desperate whimper that cut through the rain. Cale's hand shot up. The guards froze mid-step. The Vampire King's eyes narrowed as he looked down at his son, then back at Mara. Something unreadable flickered across his inhuman features. "Not yet," he said quietly. Then, into the phone still pressed to his ear. "Stay on the line. Keep him talking if he wakes." He held the phone out to Mara. She stared at it. "What?" "Take it. He's already bonded to your voice." Cale's jaw tightened. "The healers are 20 minutes out. You will keep my son alive until they arrive." Mara's hand shook as she took the phone. The screen showed the call timer still running. 14:23. He'd never hung up. Cale placed Silas back into her arms with a gentleness that seemed impossible from a creature who just threatened to peel her skin from her bones. The moment the boy settled against her chest, his shivering lessened fractionally. "I'll be watching," Cale said, stepping back into the rain. He gestured, and his guards melted into the shadows around the alley, forming a perimeter she couldn't see but could feel, predators circling in the dark. Mara pulled Silas tighter, tucking her coat around him as best she could. The boy's face was pressed against her collar, his breath coming in shallow, uneven gasps that felt wrong in a way she couldn't name. "Hey," she whispered, adjusting her grip. "Stay with me, okay? Help is coming." Silas's eyes fluttered open, too dark, too aware for a child. His lips moved, forming words she couldn't hear over the rain. "What?" Mara bent closer. "Poisoned." The word barely escaped. "They wanted me." "Sure, don't talk. Save your strength." But even as she said it, Mara noticed. His breathing wasn't just shallow, it was wrong. The rhythm stuttered, paused for too long, then gasped back to life. Like his lungs kept forgetting what they were supposed to do. She shifted him slightly, and that's when she saw it. A gash on his palm, probably from the concrete. It was bleeding, but barely, dark drops welling up so slowly they looked thick, almost black in the neon light. Not the bright red rush that should have come from a child's wound. Mara's throat tightened. She pressed her fingers gently to his neck, searching for a pulse. There. But it was sluggish, irregular. Not the quick flutter of a frightened child's heart, but something ancient and slow, like the tide pulling away from shore. "What are you?" she breathed. Silas's eyes focused on her face with terrible clarity. "Dying?" "No." "No, you're not." Mara pulled out the phone Cale had given her. "Hello?" Something's wrong with his breathing. It keeps stopping." "How long are the pauses?" Cale's voice was perfectly controlled, but she could hear the razor's edge beneath. I don't know, 3 seconds? 4. Listen carefully. Place your hand flat against his sternum, the center of his chest. Apply steady pressure. Not hard enough to crack bone, but firm. He needs to remember. Remember what?
Do it. Now.
Mara pressed her palm against Silas's chest. Through the wet velvet, she could feel the strange, sluggish beat of his heart. It felt less like a pulse and more like something stirring from sleep. Silas's eyes rolled back. His lips went from blue to gray. He's not breathing. Mara's voice cracked. He's not. Press harder.
Call him.
He's forgetting his body. Forgetting him. Mara pushed harder, leaning her weight into it.
Hey.
Hey, stay with me. Silas, look at me. Nothing. His small body went horribly still. Panic clawed up Mara's throat. She pressed harder, pouring every desperate prayer she'd ever learned into her palm. Come on, come on.
Heat.
It started in her hand, a strange, spreading warmth that felt nothing like body heat. It was deeper, older, like touching something that existed beneath skin and bone. The warmth traveled up her arm in a wave, and for one impossible moment, she felt something else. Hunger. Ancient, terrible hunger. And beneath it, fear. Silas's chest heaved. His heart slammed back to life with violent force, a single massive beat that she felt reverberate through her palm. His eyes snapped open, glowing faintly red in the darkness. He gasped, sucking in air with a wet, rattling sound. That's it. Mara breathed, relief flooding through her. Just breathe. Just. Silas grabbed her wrist with impossible strength. His fingers were ice cold, but where he touched her, that strange warmth pulsed again. His eyes locked onto hers, wide and terrified and utterly inhuman. They're still here. He whispered.
What?
Whose? Mara. Cale's voice through the phone was sharp as breaking glass. Do you see anyone? Describe your surroundings. Every detail. Mara lifted her head, scanning the street.
Rain.
Shadows. The guards she knew were there, but couldn't quite see. The dying neon from Wong's laundromat.
Wait.
Across the street, near the abandoned storefront with boarded windows. The shadows there were wrong.
Too thick. Too still.
While the rain fell everywhere else, there was a space, just a small pocket, where the water seemed to hesitate, to bend around something that wasn't there. There's something across the street, Mara said quietly, her heart starting to pound. By the old furniture store. The rain isn't falling right. Silence on the line. Then, how many? I don't. The shadows moved. 3 figures detached from the darkness, their forms barely visible against the rain. They moved too smoothly, too fluidly, like oil sliding across water. Even from this distance, Mara could see that their eyes reflected light, flat, silver discs that didn't look human at all. 3, Mara whispered. 3 of them. They're coming toward us. Silas whimpered and tried to burrow deeper into her arms. Alaric, Cale's voice carried even through the phone, a command that cut through dimensions. North side. 3 contacts. Engage. The shadows around Mara erupted. Cale's guards materialized from positions she hadn't even known they'd taken, moving with inhuman speed toward the approaching figures. The rain suddenly seemed louder, the world sharper, as if violence had a frequency all its own. Mara. Cale's voice drew her back. Pick him up. Start moving toward the vehicles. Do not run. Walk. But walk. Predators chase what runs. You are not prey. You are carrying the air to the night court. Walk like you own the ground beneath you. Mara struggled to her feet. Silas clutched against her chest. He was lighter than he should be, his body feeling hollow, like bird bones and shadow. She took 1 step, then another. Behind her, she heard sounds that would haunt her nightmares. Wet, tearing noises. A scream that didn't sound human. Then silence. But ahead, near the mouth of the alley, 3 more figures emerged from the rain. These ones didn't hide. They smiled, and their teeth caught the neon light like knives. The three figures at the alley's mouth didn't walk. They glided, their movements too fluid, joints bending at angles that made Mara's eyes hurt. Rain slid off them like oil, never quite touching their skin. The one in front tilted its head, studying Mara with eyes that reflected silver in the neon light. When it smiled, its mouth opened too wide, revealing teeth that were too many and too sharp. "Little mortal," it said, its voice like wind through broken glass. "Give us the boy." "Run." Kale's voice exploded through the phone. "Mara, run now."
Mara ran.
She clutched Silas against her chest and bolted deeper into the alley, her worn sneakers splashing through puddles, her breath already burning in her lungs. Behind her, she heard laughter. High, cruel, utterly wrong. Faster. Kale's voice was sharp in her ear. "Cut left at the dumpster. There's a gap in the fence." Mara didn't question. She veered left, squeezing through a narrow gap between chain link and brick that tore her shirt and scraped her shoulder raw. Silas whimpered against her neck, his small body trembling violently. She emerged onto another street, darker, narrower, lined with abandoned buildings and rusted fire escapes. Her legs screamed. Silas felt heavier with each step, as if he were becoming more solid, more real. Behind her, metal shrieked as the fence was torn apart. "They're still coming," Mara gasped. "I know. Keep moving. 2 blocks north, there's a construction site. Go through it." Mara's vision blurred with rain and tears. Her muscles burned. She'd never run like this in her life. Poverty meant bus stops and walking, not marathons. But fear had a way of manufacturing strength from nothing. She rounded a corner and nearly collided with a burning trash barrel. Flames licked up through the rain, fed by something chemical and foul. 2 homeless men huddled near it looked up in shock as she stumbled past. An idea sparked through her panic. Mara grabbed the barrel's edge, hot enough to burn even through the rain, and tipped it. Flaming trash spilled across the narrow alley, creating a wall of fire and smoke. She didn't wait to see if it would work. She ran. "Good," Kale said, and she could hear something like approval in his voice. "Now the construction site. You'll see blue scaffolding."
There.
Ahead on the right, a half-built structure wrapped in plastic sheeting and metal frameworks. Mara ducked under the caution tape and plunged into the maze of concrete pillars and exposed rebar. Her foot caught on something. She stumbled, nearly dropping Silas, and caught herself against a pillar. Her hands came away wet, not from rain.
Blood.
Fresh blood pooling around scattered tools and broken glass. Someone had been here recently. Someone had died here. "Mara." Silas's voice was barely a whisper. Can't run forever." "We don't have to run forever," Mara panted. "Just long enough. They want my blood." His eyes fluttered, that eerie red glow fading. "For the ritual, Father's throne. Save your strength." A shadow dropped from above. Mara threw herself sideways, crashing through plastic sheeting. She landed hard on wet concrete, her body curling around Silas to protect him. Pain exploded through her hip and shoulder. The assassin landed where she'd been standing, its fingers claws, gouging holes in the concrete. It turned its head toward her with mechanical precision. Up close, Mara could see what it truly was. The face was human-shaped but wrong, like a mask that didn't quite fit. Its eyes were solid silver, no iris, no pupil. And its skin had a gray, waxy quality, as if it were wearing death like clothing. Nowhere left to run, little mortal. It took a step forward. Mara's hand closed around something sharp. Broken glass from a shattered window. She didn't think, just moved. She surged to her feet and slashed the glass across the creature's face. It shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and stumbled back. Black ichor welled from the wound, steaming in the rain. "Go!"
Kale's voice.
Out the north side, now. Mara ran again, her makeshift weapon still clutched in her bleeding hand. She burst out of the construction site onto a main street, streetlights, a few late-night cars, a 24-hour convenience store with a flickering open sign.
People.
Witnesses. Safety in crowds. She staggered toward the light, toward humanity, toward... They were already there. 2 more of them, standing beneath a bus shelter, perfectly still despite the rain. Waiting. They'd herded her here, deliberately. Kale. Mara's voice broke. I'm coming. 30 seconds. Keep them talking. Talking? They want to kill. The nearest assassin moved with blinding speed. Mara threw herself backward, crashing into a parked car. The alarm shrieked to life, lights flashing. A window above opened, someone shouting. The assassins hesitated, their faces turned toward the noise with something like irritation. Mara used the moment. She ran across the street, dodging a taxi that blared its horn. She could see an alley ahead, narrow and dark, but better than being exposed. If she could just... Something grabbed her ankle. She went down hard, her head cracking against pavement. Stars exploded across her vision. Silas rolled from her arms with a cry of pain. No! Mara screamed, reaching for him. The assassin pinned her down, its weight crushing, its breath cold against her face. You should have given him to us quickly, mortal. Now you'll watch him die slowly. Mara? Silas's voice was so small. He was trying to crawl toward her, his small body dragging across wet concrete. Don't leave me. I won't, Mara choked out. She clawed at the creature holding her, her fingers finding its eyes. It screamed and reared back. Mara rolled, grabbed Silas, and stumbled into the alley's mouth. Dead end. She could see the brick wall ahead, no way out, no way through. They were trapped. The 3 assassins appeared at the alley entrance, blocking the only exit. They moved forward slowly now, savoring their victory. Behind them, the street was empty, witnesses scared away, traffic diverted, the world conspiring to leave Mara and Silas alone to die. End of the line, one said. Mara pressed her back against the wall, holding Silas against her chest. Her makeshift weapon was gone. Her body was broken. She had nothing left, except defiance. Come on then, she spat, her voice steadier than she felt. Let's get this over with. The assassin smiled and raised its clawed hand, and then the rain stopped falling. Not everywhere,
Just in the alley.
the drops simply froze in midair, suspended like crystal beads catching light. The temperature plummeted so suddenly that Mara's breath misted. The assassin's smiles died. They turned slowly, their inhuman confidence cracking into something that looked almost like fear. Shadows poured into the alley from nowhere and everywhere at once. They coalesced into shapes, guards in dark suits, moving with lethal precision. The assassins tried to run, tried to fight. They didn't stand a chance. It was over in seconds.
Silent.
Efficient. Brutal. The guards moved like choreographed dancers, every strike perfect, every movement economical. Black ichor splashed against brick. Bodies, if they could be called bodies, crumpled to the ground and began dissolving into smoke. Then the guards parted. And through the space they created, through rain that fell everywhere except where he walked, Lord Cale Draven stepped into the alley. His eyes blazed crimson in the darkness. His perfectly tailored suit was unmarred despite the carnage. And the rage that rolled off him was a physical thing, making the air taste of copper and winter. He looked at the dissolving assassins. Then at Mara, collapsed and bled against the wall. Then at Silas, unconscious in her arms. You survived, Cale said quietly. It wasn't a question. It was something between wonder and judgment. Mara's vision was starting to blur. She thought she nodded. Then, Cale continued, moving toward them with inhuman grace, we have much to discuss. He knelt beside her, and the last thing Mara saw before darkness took her was his hand reaching out. Not for his son, but for her face, his fingers impossibly gentle as they brushed the blood from her temple. Sleep now, Mara Collins, he murmured. You've earned it. And the world went dark. Mara woke to silk. Not the scratchy polyester of her thrift store sheets, but real silk, cool and impossibly smooth against her skin. For one disorienting moment, she thought she'd died. Then pain crashed through her body like a wave, and she knew with bitter certainty that she was still alive. Her eyes opened to darkness, softened by candlelight. She was lying on a leather seat in a vehicle that moved so smoothly, it felt like floating. The interior was all black leather and polished wood, the kind of luxury she'd only seen in movies. Across from her sat Lord Cale Draven. He hadn't changed position since she'd lost consciousness. She could sense that somehow, as if he'd been watching her the entire time. His posture was perfect, one leg crossed over the other, hands resting on his knee with terrible patience. The crimson had faded from his eyes, leaving them the color of storm clouds over deep water. "You're awake," he observed. Not a question. A statement of fact. Mara tried to sit up. Her body screamed in protest. Scraped palms, bruised ribs, a knot on her head that throbbed with each heartbeat. She managed to prop herself on one elbow. "Silas is alive." Cale's voice was perfectly neutral. "Thanks to you." Mara's gaze swept the vehicle. The boy was in the seat beside Cale, bundled in what looked like a cashmere blanket, his small chest rising and falling with more natural rhythm now. And 4 line ran from his arm to a bag of something that definitely wasn't saline. It was too dark, too thick. "What is that?" Mara whispered. "Medicine." Cale's tone indicated the subject was closed. His attention returned to her, and Mara felt the weight of that gaze like physical pressure. "You protected my son. You kept him alive when trained assassins wanted him dead. You used fire, glass, and desperation against creatures that have killed men twice your size." It didn't sound like praise. It sounded like an inventory. "I didn't have a choice," Mara said, her voice rough. "Everyone has a choice. You made yours." Cale leaned forward slightly, and Mara fought the instinct to press back against the seat. "Now I will make mine." "What does that mean?" Instead of answering, Cale looked down at Silas. His hand, those same hands that had torn through assassins like paper, reached out and brushed a curl from the boy's forehead with impossible gentleness. "Father?" Silas's eyes fluttered open, still too large, too dark, but no longer glowing. "I'm here." Cale's voice transformed, losing its edge, becoming something almost human. "You're safe now." "The lady." Silas's gaze drifted to Mara. "She didn't leave me." "No," Cale agreed softly. "She didn't. Everyone else, they all—" Silas's small face crumpled. "Uncle Mordain said I was going to the theater. But then the car stopped and he wasn't Uncle Mordain anymore." His eyes changed. "And then I was running and everything hurt and—" "Sho." Cale gathered his son against his chest, and for a moment, Mara glimpsed something beneath the monster. A father's love, ancient and absolute.
Sleep.
"We'll speak of betrayal later." Silas's eyes drifted closed again, his breathing evening out. When Cale looked up, the softness was gone. The Vampire King had returned. "You saved the heir to the Night Court," he said. "That binds you to us now, whether you wish it or not." "Binds me?" Mara's heart began to race. "I just helped a kid." "That doesn't mean—" "You've seen too much. You know what we are. You've touched my son and survived his awakening." Cale's expression was carved from marble. "There are 3 options for mortals who cross our threshold: service, death, or transformation. Choose." "That's not a choice. That's a threat." "Yes." No apology. No pretense. "It is." Mara stared at him, this creature wearing the shape of a man, this king who ruled from shadows. "And if I refuse? If I just want to go back to my life?" "You have no life to return to." Cale gestured, and Mara noticed for the first time that there were screens embedded in the vehicle's walls. One flickered to life, showing her apartment building. Yellow police tape. Flashing lights. "The assassins searched for you while you ran. They were thorough." The image shifted. Her room, what was left of it, Furniture overturned, possessions destroyed, walls streaked with something dark. Mara's throat closed. That was everything she owned. Her entire world, small as it was. The Night Court's enemies are now your enemies, Kale continued, his voice matter-of-fact. You can survive that alone, or you can accept my protection. I'm offering you a place in my household, under my authority, with compensation appropriate to your new role. What role? Silas has bonded to you. That's unprecedented for a mortal. Kale's jaw tightened fractionally, the only sign of emotion. You will be his companion, his guardian during daylight hours. His bridge to the mortal world, he must one day rule alongside the immortal one. I'm not qualified to. You kept my son alive through an assassination attempt with nothing but broken glass and stubbornness. You're more qualified than half my court. Kale's eyes glinted. This is not a request, Mara Collins. You crossed into our world the moment you dialed that number. The only question is whether you walk forward or are dragged. The vehicle slowed. Through the tinted windows, Mara glimpsed iron gates opening onto grounds that seemed to exist outside of reality. Too large for the city, too perfect for anywhere real. Choose now, Kale said quietly, before we arrive. Mara looked at Silas, sleeping peacefully now, his small hand clutching the blanket. She thought of her destroyed apartment, her minimum-wage jobs, her invisible life. She thought of the strange warmth that had passed between them when his heart had stopped. If I do this, she said slowly, I want your word that you won't hurt me, that I'm not just a prisoner. You have my word that no harm will come to you from the Night Court, so long as you remain loyal. Kale extended his hand, pale and perfect in the candlelight. But understand, loyalty to the Night Court means loyalty unto death. There is no resignation, no retirement. This is forever, Mara Collins. Forever. The gates swung fully open, revealing a mansion that defied architecture. Part Gothic cathedral, part modern fortress, all impossible beauty. Mara took his hand. It was cold as winter stone, and the moment their skin touched, she felt that warmth again, that strange recognition, like her blood knew something her mind didn't. Welcome, Kale said, to the Night Court. The vehicle rolled forward, and Mara Collins crossed the threshold into a world she could never leave. If you're on the edge of your seat wondering what happens when Mara enters the Vampire King's domain, smash that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love seeing our story family grow across the globe. Trust me, what comes next in the Night Court will blow your mind. Now let's step through those gates together. The mansion swallowed them whole. That was the only way Mara could describe it, not entering, but being consumed. The vehicle glided through gates that closed behind them with the finality of a tomb ceiling, and suddenly the rain-soaked city felt like a memory from another life. The courtyard was impossible. It stretched too far, lined with trees that shouldn't exist in December, ancient oaks with leaves of silver and gold, their branches heavy with night-blooming flowers that glowed faintly in the darkness. Fountains flowed with water that caught starlight despite the overcast sky. And beyond it all rose the mansion itself. Gothic spires piercing upward, stained glass windows depicting scenes of battles and coronations, stone that looked medieval yet felt alive. How is this hidden? Mara whispered. The same way we are, Kale replied, stepping from the vehicle with Silas still cradled in his arms. Through power, blood, and bargains older than your language has words for. The doors opened before they reached them. Massive oak and iron affairs that must have weighed tons, yet they swung silently inward. Beyond lay an entrance hall that defied physics. The ceiling soared upward into shadow, held aloft by pillars carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Chandeliers burned with flames that cast no smoke. And everywhere were vampires. They materialized from doorways and descended staircases, emerging from shadows as if the darkness itself was giving birth. Some wore modern suits, others clothing from centuries past, velvet and brocade, silk and leather. Their eyes tracked Mara's movement with predatory focus, glowing faintly in shades of amber, crimson, and silver. Mara's instinct screamed to run. But Kale's hand settled on her shoulder, not restraining, but claiming. "This is Mara Collins," he announced, his voice carrying through the hall without rising. "She is under my personal protection. Any who harm her answer to me." The weight of dozens of immortal gazes pressed against Mara's skin. Then, as one, they bowed, a ripple of deference that started at the front and spread backward like a wave. All except one. A man stood at the base of the grand staircase, tall and elegant in deep purple robes embroidered with gold thread. His hair was white blonde, pulled back to reveal a face of terrible beauty marred only by eyes that held nothing but cold calculation. He inclined his head barely. "My lord," he said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. "Thank the ancients you've returned. We feared the worst when young Silas failed to arrive at the theater." "Did you, Mordain?" Kale's tone could have frozen blood. So this was the uncle, the betrayer. Mara felt Silas tense in Kale's arms, his small face pressing harder against his father's chest. "Of course, my lord. The entire court has been searching." Searching. Kale descended the steps slowly, each footfall echoing like a judge's gavel. "Tell me, Regent Mordain, how did assassins with court-forbidden alchemy manage to ambush my son in a vehicle you personally arranged?" The hall fell utterly silent. Mordain's smile never wavered, but something flickered in his eyes. "My lord, surely you don't suggest." "I suggest nothing. Yet." Kale handed Silas to a woman who appeared at his elbow, ancient, draped in gray silk, her eyes kind despite their silver glow. "Healer Vesper. Purge the poison. Use whatever means necessary." "At once, my lord." Vesper took Silas with practiced gentleness, though the boy whimpered and reached back toward Mara. "I want to stay with her," Silas whispered. "Soon," Kale promised. "First, you must be healed." As Vesper carried Silas away, Mara felt suddenly, terribly alone. The vampires around her seemed to lean closer, their attention sharpening. "Take Miss Collins to the East Wing," Kale commanded. "See that she has everything she requires." "My lord," Mordain interjected smoothly. "Surely a mortal should be questioned first? To verify her account of the evening's events." "Are you questioning my judgment, Regent?" "Never, my lord. I merely suggest caution. We know nothing of this woman. She could be an agent of our enemies, a plant designed to—" "Enough." Kale's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried further than a shout. "You will convene the inner council in my study. 1 hour. Every member will attend, or they will be considered complicit in tonight's treason." Treason. The word hung in the air like an executioner's blade. Mordain's smile finally cracked. "My lord, I assure you. 1 hour, Mordain. Don't be late." 2 guards, a woman with dark skin and eyes like molten gold, and a man whose face was all sharp angles, materialized beside Mara. "This way, miss," the woman said, not unkindly. Mara let them guide her through corridors that twisted in ways architecture shouldn't allow. They climbed stairs that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them, past doorways that opened onto impossible rooms, a library that stretched into infinity, a conservatory filled with flowers that bloomed in darkness, a gallery lined with portraits whose subjects' eyes followed her movement. Finally, they reached a door of dark wood inlaid with silver. "Your quarters," the male guard said, opening it to reveal a room larger than her entire apartment had been. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in midnight blue silk. A fireplace crackled with flames that cast warmth but no smoke. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the impossible gardens. "Someone will bring you clothing," the woman added. "Food, if you require it. Do not leave this room until sent for." They withdrew, and Mara heard the distinctive click of a lock engaging. She was a prisoner in a gilded cage. Mara moved to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. From here, she could see other wings of the mansion, connected by covered walkways. In one, she glimpsed movement. Kale, striding toward what must be a study, his posture rigid with barely contained fury. Figures followed him. She counted them. 7 vampires, Mordain among them, filing into the room one by one. The council meeting. Mara knew she should rest, should tend to her wounds, should process everything that had happened. But something pulled her toward the door. She tried the handle, locked as expected. But the old building had secrets, and poverty had taught her to notice them. There. A servant's passage, barely visible beside the wardrobe, its entrance hidden behind a tapestry. She slipped through into a narrow corridor that smelled of dust and centuries. Following the sound of voices, she crept through the walls until she found a ventilation grate that overlooked Kale's study. Below, the council had assembled. She recognized Mordain immediately, standing with deceptive casualness near the fire. The others she didn't know, but she could read power in their postures, age in their eyes. Let's be clear, Kale was saying, his back to the room as he stared into flames. My son was poisoned with Shadowbane extract, a substance kept under lock and ward in the court's deepest vault. Only 7 vampires hold keys to that vault. All 7 are in this room. The temperature seemed to drop. My lord, a woman in crimson said carefully, surely there are other explanations. My son nearly died tonight. Not in some distant ambush, but here, within our territory, under our protection, while being transported in a vehicle we provided. Kale turned, and his eyes blazed. One of you tried to murder my heir, and I will have blood for it. In the shadows, Mara watched Mordain's face, and saw him smile.
Whoa.
Did you see that coming? If that courtroom scene gave you chills, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments which moment shocked you most. Was it Mordain's betrayal or his brutal end? And hey, if you're watching from anywhere in the world right now, drop your location below. I'm reading every single comment. We've still got more story ahead, so don't go anywhere. Shadowbane extract, Kale continued, his voice cutting through the study like a blade through silk, requires 3 components to synthesize: nightshade root aged in vampire blood, silver dust from a consecrated blade, and the voluntary sacrifice of mortal life force. Mara's breath caught. She pressed closer to the grate, her heart hammering. The last ingredient, a male council member said slowly, elderly, with a beard like spider silk, makes it traceable. No mortal volunteers for such a death. There would be a body. Evidence. Unless, Mordain interjected smoothly, the mortal was already dying. A hospital patient. A condemned prisoner. Someone whose death would go unnoticed.
He spread his hands.
My lord, I understand your rage, but Shadowbane has been stolen before. 3 decades ago, during the Prague incident. The Prague theft was a distraction for a territorial dispute, Kale interrupted. This was targeted.
Precise.
Someone knew Silas would be in that vehicle, knew his route, knew the exact moment to strike. The driver, the woman in crimson suggested. Perhaps he was compromised. The driver's throat was torn out before the vehicle stopped. I saw his body. Kale's hands flexed at his sides. Whoever orchestrated this had access to court schedules, vault keys, and enough authority that their presence near the transport wouldn't raise suspicion. The silence that followed was suffocating. Mordain's smile had frozen in place. My lord, surely you're not accusing. The study door burst open. Healer Vesper stood in the doorway, her face grave. My lord, the boy is asking for the mortal woman. He won't settle. His vitals are spiking, and if we sedate him further, the poison may take hold again. Kale's expression shifted, calculation warring with something deeper. Bring her. Above, Mara scrambled back from the grate. She'd barely made it back through the servant's passage when her door unlocked. The female guard from before stood there, her golden eyes unreadable. You're needed. Mara followed without argument, though her mind raced. They descended through the mansion's impossible corridors until they reached a wing that smelled of herbs and something metallic. Blood, she realized with a chill. Silas lay in a bed too large for his small frame, surrounded by monitoring equipment that looked equal parts medieval and futuristic. His skin had regained some color, but his breathing was still labored. The moment Mara entered, his eyes snapped open. Mara, his voice was thin but urgent. She crossed to him instinctively, taking his small hand. The strange warmth pulsed between them again, stronger now.
Hey.
I'm here. Silas's grip tightened desperately. Don't let them take you away.
Please.
Everyone else left me or tried to hurt me. Uncle Mordain, the boy's voice broke. His eyes changed in the car. He wasn't my uncle anymore. Mara felt ice spread through her chest. She looked up to find Cale standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Behind him, the council members crowded, listening. Silas, Cale said gently, moving to the opposite side of the bed. What happened in the vehicle? Tell me everything. We were going to the theater. Uncle Mordain was telling me about the performance, something with music and lights. But then the driver made a strange sound, and the car stopped wrong. Too fast. And Uncle Mordain's face. Silas shuddered. He smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. He said, "Forgive me, nephew, but some bloodlines must end for new ones to begin." Then he put something in my mouth. It tasted like poison and metal and death. And then Cale's voice was deceptively soft. I felt wrong. Everything hurts. He opened the door and pushed me out. I tried to run, but my legs stopped working. I fell and it was raining, and I thought I was going to die alone. Tears streaked down Silas's pale cheeks. Then Mara found me. Mordain's voice cut through from the doorway, sharp with false concern. My lord, the boy is clearly confused. The poison causes hallucinations. I'm not confused. Silas tried to sit up, his small frame shaking with fury and fear. It was you. You poisoned me. A child's fevered imaginings. Enough. Cale's single word silenced the room. He turned to Mara, his storm-gray eyes boring into hers. You were there. You saw him in the street. What time? Around 2:45 a.m., Mara said, her voice steadier than she felt. And his condition? Already poisoned. He could barely stand. He'd been there a while. His clothes were soaked through, not just from the rain but from lying in puddles. Cale's jaw tightened. The theater performance ended at 2:30. The venue is 12 minutes from where you found him. He turned to face Mordain fully. Yet you reported arriving back here at 2:35, stating that Silas had gone missing after you stopped for refreshments. The timeline is impossible, Cale finished. Unless you left him in that alley and returned here immediately. Unless you poisoned him, discarded him, and came back to establish your alibi while my son died in the rain. Mordain's mask finally shattered. His eyes blazed silver, his lips pulling back to reveal fangs. You have no proof. A mortal's testimony? A traumatized child's accusations? The council will never. I saw the number on his wrist, Mara interrupted, surprised by her own boldness. Written in permanent marker. Fresh. Someone wrote it there recently, deliberately. Why would Silas need an emergency contact number written on his skin unless someone knew he'd need it? The council members shifted, exchanging glances. It was insurance, Mara continued, pieces clicking into place as she spoke. You couldn't guarantee he'd die immediately from the poison. So you gave him a chance to call for help, just enough to avoid suspicion if he survived. But you didn't count on him collapsing before he could reach a phone. And you definitely didn't count on someone actually helping him. Cale stared at her with something that might have been respect. Then he moved, faster than thought, crossing the room to grip Mordain by the throat and slam him against the wall hard enough to crack stone. Speak truth or die, Cale hissed, his fangs fully extended, eyes blazing crimson. By the old laws, by blood and throne, I command it. Mordain struggled, but Cale's grip was iron. You have no heir but him. The regent gasped. The court needs stability, not a child king, not another century of regency. So you would murder him? Your own nephew? Half-nephew, Mordain spat. Diluted blood. His mother was mortal. He's barely more vampire than that girl. He gestured viciously toward Mara. The throne deserves pure blood. Ancient blood. My blood. The study exploded with motion. Council members drew back, some in shock, others, Mara noticed with dread, with calculating expressions. They'd known. Not all, perhaps, but some had been complicit. Kale released Mordain, letting him drop to the floor. When he spoke, his voice carried through the mansion like thunder. By my authority as Vampire King and Lord of the Night Court, I summon the full assembly. Every member, every bloodline, every voice. We convene at moonrise. His eyes swept the room, promising retribution. And we will have judgment. In the medical chamber, Silas clung to Mara's hand, his small voice barely a whisper. Is father going to kill Uncle Mordain? Mara looked at the boy's terrified face, then at Kale's back as he strode from the room, a king wrapped in fury and ancient law. Yes, she said softly. I think he is. The great hall defied mortal comprehension. Mara stood at its edge, feeling smaller than she'd ever felt in her life. The chamber stretched upward into darkness that seemed to have no ceiling, its walls lined with banners bearing symbols from empires long dead. Chandeliers of bone and crystal cast light that was simultaneously too bright and not bright enough, illuminating the assembled vampires without revealing the shadows between them. There were hundreds, perhaps thousands. They filled the hall in a hierarchy Mara couldn't fully parse. Ancient ones near the front in clothing from centuries past, younger vampires toward the rear in modern dress. But all of them shared the same predatory stillness, the same inhuman beauty, the same eyes that glowed faintly in the half-light. And every single one of them was watching the throne. Kale sat upon a chair carved from black stone, his posture perfect, his expression carved from ice. He wore formal regalia now, a coat of midnight blue embroidered with silver thread that formed patterns of stars and spirals, a crown of blackened metal that seemed to drink light rather than reflect it. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. Beside the throne, in a smaller chair, sat Silas. The boy looked terrified but determined, his small hands gripping the armrests. Healer Vesper stood behind him, one hand resting protectively on his shoulder. And there, in the center of the hall, flanked by guards, stood Mordain. The regent's purple robes were gone, replaced by simple black. His hands were bound with chains that steamed where they touched his skin. Silver, Mara realized. The metal that burned vampire flesh. Regent Mordain. Kale's voice filled the hall without echo, as if the space itself carried his words. You stand accused of treason against the throne, attempted murder of the heir, and conspiracy to seize power through blood and poison. How do you answer? Mordain raised his head, and his eyes blazed with defiance. I answer that I acted for the good of the Night Court. That boy, he gestured towards Silas with contempt, is weak, half-mortal. His mother's human blood pollutes our ancient line. Would you have him rule when he can walk in daylight? When he must eat mortal food alongside blood? When he ages, however slowly? A murmur rippled through the assembly. You dare speak of pollution? Kale's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried further. You, who poisoned a child, who abandoned your own blood in the rain to die choking on Shadowbane. I gave him mercy. Mordain snarled. A quick death rather than a lifetime of weakness. You gave him nothing but betrayal. Kale rose from the throne, descending the steps with terrible grace. But you did give us something. Evidence. He gestured. Guards brought forward a wooden box, its surface carved with warding symbols. Kale opened it to reveal vials of dark liquid, a silver blade stained with rust-colored residue, and Mara's stomach turned, what looked like dried flowers made from something that had once been human. Shadowbane extract, synthesized in your private chambers. The silver blade from your family's vault. And the mortal component, Kale's voice hardened, a homeless woman from the docks. Her name was Sarah Chen. She was 43 years old. And she did not volunteer. The assembly stirred. Even among vampires, Mara realized there were lines.
Laws.
This crossed them. You think they care? Mordain laughed, wild and desperate. Half of this court agrees with me. They know the boy is weak. Know he'll never be the king we need. Then let them speak. Kale's challenge rang out. Any who support the regent's treason, step forward now. I will grant you the mercy of a clean death rather than the slow one you deserve. Silence. No one moved. Mordain's eyes darted across the assembly, searching for allies who wouldn't meet his gaze. Cowards, he spat. You whispered your support in private, promised your aid if I succeeded. If you succeeded, a voice called from the assembly, the woman in crimson from the council. But you failed, Mordain. You failed because you underestimated a mortal girl with more courage than you've shown in 5 centuries. Eyes turned to Mara. She felt the weight of their attention like physical pressure. The human stays, another voice agreed. She proved her loyalty when we could not. Mordain's composure finally shattered completely. With a roar that echoed inhuman, he tore through his silver chains, the metal burning away his flesh to the bone. He lunged not at Kale, but at Silas. If the boy dies, the line dies with him. Everything happened at once. Guards moved. Healer Vesper threw herself in front of Silas. The assembly surged forward in chaos. But Kale was faster. He moved like lightning given form, intercepting Mordain mid-leap. They collided with a sound like thunder, crashing through ancient stone pillars. Mordain fought with the desperation of the damned, claws tearing, fangs snapping. But Kale was unstoppable, a king defending his heir, a father protecting his son, an ancient force that had ruled for centuries against those who would challenge him. It ended with Kale's hand wrapped around Mordain's throat, lifting him off the ground as easily as Mara might lift a doll. By the old laws, Kale pronounced, his voice resonating with power that made the air itself vibrate. By blood and throne and the covenant of our kind, I declare you traitor and kinslayer. I strip you of the name, of the house, of the honor of burial. And I grant you the execution you sought to give my son, death by the very poison you crafted. Mordain thrashed, but Kale forced his jaw open with inhuman strength. The vial of Shadowbane extract poured down the regent's throat. The effect was immediate and horrible. Mordain screamed, a sound no throat should make, as the poison burned through his immortal flesh from within. His skin grayed, then blackened. Cracks spread across his face like shattered porcelain. Light leaked from the fractures, not blood, but something older, the very essence of vampire life force burning away. Remember this, Kale said to the assembly, holding Mordain aloft as he disintegrated. This is the price of treason. Mordain crumbled to ash. The remains scattered across marble floors like snow. The hall fell silent. Then, like a wave, the entire night court knelt. Hundreds of vampires bowing as one, their foreheads touching the ground in absolute submission. Long live the king, they intoned. Long live the heir. Only 3 figures remained standing. Kale on the steps, Silas in his chair, and Mara, frozen at the edge of the hall, the only human in a sea of immortals. Kale's eyes found hers across the distance. He walked toward her, and the assembly parted like water. When he stood before her, covered in ash, crowned in darkness, he spoke softly enough that only she could hear. You saved my son. You exposed betrayal. You stood witness to our justice. His expression was unreadable. The Night Court owes you a debt. Name your price, Mara Collins. Wealth? Power? Freedom? Or his pause was weighted. Something more? Mara looked past him to Silas, who watched her with desperate hope in his 2 large eyes. She thought of her destroyed apartment, her invisible life, her $18 shifts. She thought of strange warmth and a child's grip and a phone call that changed everything. I don't want to leave, she heard herself say. I don't want to forget. And I don't want him to be alone. Kale's lips curved, not quite a smile, but close. Then stay. He offered his hand, and Mara took it. The private study was smaller than Mara expected, intimate, almost human in scale. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm light across leather-bound books and maps of territories that no longer existed. Through the window, she could see the impossible gardens turning silver with pre-dawn light. Cale stood by the fire, his formal regalia discarded, wearing only a simple shirt and trousers. Without the crown and coat, he looked less like a king and more like what he was, an ancient predator wrestling with something uncomfortably close to gratitude. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. Mara sat, her body finally registering every bruise, every scrape, every moment of terror from the past few hours. She was so tired she could barely think straight. Cale poured something amber into a crystal glass and set it before her. "Brandy. 200 years old. It will help." She took it but didn't drink. "Where's Silas?" "Sleeping." Finally. Cale's expression softened fractionally. "Vesper says the poison is purged. He'll recover fully." He paused. "Because of you. I just made a phone call." "You did far more than that." Cale settled into the chair opposite, studying her with those storm-gray eyes. "Which brings us to your reward. The debt the Night Court owes you." Mara's fingers tightened on the glass. "You said I could name my price." "And I meant it." Cale leaned forward. "I can give you wealth beyond anything you've imagined. Enough that you'd never work another $18 shift. Enough for any life you choose." The offer hung in the air like smoke. "Or," Cale continued, his voice careful, "I can give you something rarer. Freedom from memory. We have methods, ancient, precise. You could wake up tomorrow in a new apartment, with enough money to start over, remembering nothing of vampires or blood courts or children dying in the rain." Mara's breath caught. To forget. To go back to invisible poverty without the weight of impossible knowledge. To sleep without dreaming of silver eyes and teeth like knives. "You'd be safe," Cale said quietly. "Protected from our enemies through obscurity. You could live a normal human life." Normal. The word tasted bitter. Mara finally took a sip of the brandy. It burned beautifully. "I was normal yesterday. Working doubles at a laundromat. $18.60 for 12 hours. 1 week behind on rent in a room with broken heating. That was my normal." She met his eyes. "I was invisible. Expendable. Just another poor girl the world had already decided wasn't worth noticing." Her voice hardened. "And I'm tired of being invisible." Cale's expression shifted. Surprise, perhaps even respect. "The moment I picked up Silas," Mara continued, "the moment I called that number, I stopped being invisible. You saw me. Your son saw me. I mattered." She set down the glass with deliberate force. "I'm not going back to being nothing." "You would choose this?" Cale's gesture encompassed the mansion, the impossible world beyond. "A life among predators? Always in danger? Forever changed." "I'm already changed. You can't erase that, not really. And I'd rather live with the truth than hide in comfortable lies." A knock interrupted them. The door opened to reveal Silas, wrapped in blankets too large for his small frame, healer Vesper hovering behind him. "I'm sorry, my lord," Vesper said. He insisted. "It's fine." Cale waved her away. Silas crossed to Mara's chair with determined steps. His eyes, too large, too dark, too aware, fixed on her face with desperate intensity. "Father's giving you choices," he said, his child's voice cutting straight to the heart. "Lots of money, or forgetting, or leaving. But there's another choice he didn't say." "Silas," Cale warned. "You could stay." The boy's small hand found Mara's. That strange warmth pulsed between them, stronger than before. "With us. With me. You wouldn't have to be alone anymore. And neither would I." Mara looked down at the boy who'd nearly died in her arms. At his too pale face and ancient eyes and the desperate hope that made him look, finally, like the 7-year-old child he should be. "Your father just offered me enough money to live anywhere," she said gently. Why would I stay in a mansion full of vampires? Because you're brave, Silas said simply. And because you didn't leave me in the rain when everyone else would have walked away. Something cracked in Mara's chest, a wall she'd built from years of disappointment and survival. She looked up at Cale. I want a new deal. His eyebrow rose. Indeed, I stay. But not as a servant or a prisoner. I'm Silas's companion, his bridge to humanity, like you said. I teach him what it means to be human even while he's learning to be vampire.
Her voice steadied.
And in return, you guarantee my safety, my education, and when I'm ready, a real choice to leave or stay. No memory erasure. No compulsion. A real choice. You bargain with a vampire king? Cale's tone was unreadable. I bargain with a father who loves a son. For a long moment, Cale simply stared at her. Then, slowly, he smiled, a real smile, not the careful mask he wore for his court. You'll do, he said. Welcome to the Night Court, Mara Collins. Officially. Through the window, the sky was turning pink. Dawn. The first sunrise of her new life. Dawn broke over the city, like a promise. Mara watched from the east wing windows as light spilled across the impossible gardens, turning silver leaves to gold. The rain had finally stopped. Below, the Night Court's vampires retreated into shadow, not fleeing, but yielding gracefully to the sun's ancient claim on the world. It had been 3 weeks since that rain-soaked night. 3 weeks since an $18 shift had changed everything. Behind her, Silas sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by books, some on vampire history, others on human mathematics and science. His recovery had been remarkable. The poison was gone, his strength returned, but something fundamental had shifted. He clung less desperately now, spoke more confidently. The terror in his eyes had been replaced by something steadier. Trust. Mara, listen to this, he said, looking up from a leather-bound tome. It says here that only 7 mortals in recorded history have ever been granted full sanctuary in the Night Court, and none of them survived past their first year. Encouraging, Mara said dryly. But you're different. Silas's certainty was absolute. You're stronger than they were.
Was she?
Mara touched the silver pendant at her throat, Cale's gift, a symbol of protection recognized throughout the supernatural world. The girl who'd scrubbed laundry for survival now wore jewelry worth more than her entire former life. But wealth wasn't what made her strong. The door opened. Alaric, the guard with golden eyes who'd first escorted her, entered with his usual impeccable timing. Miss Collins, your instructor is waiting. Cale's lips curved, not quite a smile, but close. Then stay. He offered his hand, and Mara took it. The private study was smaller than Mara expected, intimate, almost human in scale. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm light across leather-bound books and maps of territories that no longer existed. Through the window, she could see the impossible gardens turning silver with pre-dawn light. Cale stood by the fire, his formal regalia discarded, wearing only a simple shirt and trousers. Without the crown and coat, he looked less like a king and more like what he was, an ancient predator wrestling with something uncomfortably close to gratitude. Sit, he said, gesturing to a chair. Mara sat, her body finally registering every bruise, every scrape, every moment of terror from the past few hours. She was so tired she could barely think straight. Cale poured something amber into a crystal glass and set it before her. Brandy. 200 years old. It will help. She took it but didn't drink. Where's Silas? Sleeping. Finally. Cale's expression softened fractionally. Vesper says the poison is purged. He'll recover fully.
He paused.
Because of you. I just made a phone call. You did far more than that. Cale settled into the chair opposite, studying her with those storm-gray eyes. Which brings us to your reward. The debt the Night Court owes you. Mara's fingers tightened on the glass. You said I could name my price. And I meant it. Cale leaned forward. I can give you wealth beyond anything you've imagined. Enough that you'd never work another $18 shift. Enough for any life you choose. The offer hung in the air like smoke. Or, Cale continued, his voice careful, I can give you something rarer. Freedom from memory. We have methods, ancient, precise. You could wake up tomorrow in a new apartment, with enough money to start over, remembering nothing of vampires or blood courts or children dying in the rain. Mara's breath caught. To forget. To go back to invisible poverty without the weight of impossible knowledge. To sleep without dreaming of silver eyes and teeth like knives. You'd be safe, Cale said quietly. Protected from our enemies through obscurity. You could live a normal human life. Normal. The word tasted bitter. Mara finally took a sip of the brandy. It burned beautifully. I was normal yesterday. Working doubles at a laundromat. $18.60 for 12 hours. 1 week behind on rent in a room with broken heating. That was my normal. She met his eyes. I was invisible. Expendable. Just another poor girl the world had already decided wasn't worth noticing. Her voice hardened. And I'm tired of being invisible. Cale's expression shifted. Surprise. Perhaps even respect. The moment I picked up Silas, Mara continued, the moment I called that number, I stopped being invisible. You saw me. Your son saw me. I mattered. She set down the glass with deliberate force. I'm not going back to being nothing. You would choose this? Cale's gesture encompassed the mansion, the impossible world beyond. A life among predators? Always in danger? Forever changed? I'm already changed. You can't erase that, not really. And I'd rather live with the truth than hide in comfortable lies. A knock interrupted them. The door opened to reveal Silas, wrapped in blankets too large for his small frame, healer Vesper hovering behind him. I'm sorry, my lord, Vesper said. He insisted. It's fine. Cale waved her away. Silas crossed to Mara's chair with determined steps. His eyes, too large, too dark, too aware, fixed on her face with desperate intensity. Father's giving you choices, he said, his child's voice cutting straight to the heart. Lots of money, or forgetting or leaving. But there's another choice he didn't say. Silas, Cale warned. You could stay. The boy's small hand found Mara's. That strange warmth pulsed between them, stronger than before. With us. With me. You wouldn't have to be alone anymore. And neither would I. Mara looked down at the boy who'd nearly died in her arms. At his too pale face and ancient eyes and the desperate hope that made him look, finally, like the 7-year-old child he should be. Your father just offered me enough money to live anywhere, she said gently. Why would I stay in a mansion full of vampires? Because you're brave, Silas said simply. And because you didn't leave me in the rain when everyone else would have walked away. Something cracked in Mara's chest, a wall she'd built from years of disappointment and survival. She looked up at Cale. I want a new deal. His eyebrow rose. Indeed, I stay. But not as a servant or a prisoner. I'm Silas's companion, his bridge to humanity, like you said. I teach him what it means to be human even while he's learning to be vampire. Her voice steadied. And in return, you guarantee my safety, my education, and when I'm ready, a real choice to leave or stay. No memory erasure. No compulsion. A real choice. You bargain with a vampire king? Cale's tone was unreadable. I bargain with a father who loves his son. For a long moment, Cale simply stared at her. Then, slowly, he smiled, a real smile, not the careful mask he wore for his court. You'll do, he said. Welcome to the Night Court, Mara Collins. Officially. Through the window, the sky was turning pink. Dawn. The first sunrise of her new life. Dawn broke over the city, like a promise. Mara watched from the east wing windows as light spilled across the impossible gardens, turning silver leaves to gold. The rain had finally stopped. Below, the Night Court's vampires retreated into shadow, not fleeing, but yielding gracefully to the sun's ancient claim on the world. It had been 3 weeks since that rain-soaked night. 3 weeks since an $18 shift had changed everything. Behind her, Silas sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by books, some on vampire history, others on human mathematics and science. His recovery had been remarkable. The poison was gone, his strength returned, but something fundamental had shifted. He clung less desperately now, spoke more confidently. The terror in his eyes had been replaced by something steadier.
Trust.
Mara, listen to this, he said, looking up from a leather-bound tome. It says here that only 7 mortals in recorded history have ever been granted full sanctuary in the Night Court, and none of them survived past their first year. Encouraging, Mara said dryly. But you're different. Silas's certainty was absolute. You're stronger than they were. Was she? Mara touched the silver pendant at her throat, Kale's gift, a symbol of protection recognized throughout the supernatural world. The girl who'd scrubbed laundry for survival now wore jewelry worth more than her entire former life. But wealth wasn't what made her strong. The door opened. Alaric, the guard with golden eyes who'd first escorted her, entered with his usual impeccable timing. Miss Collins, your instructor is waiting. Mara nodded. Her days now followed a pattern she was still learning. Dawn with Silas, morning lessons in vampire law and court politics, afternoon training in self-defense, because Kale insisted she'd be able to protect herself, evening tutoring in languages she'd never dreamed of learning. She was no longer invisible. She was being forged into something new. Silas, your father wants you in the council chamber at noon, Alaric added. The boy's face lit up. After Mordaine's execution, Kale had begun including Silas in minor court affairs, teaching him, slowly, what it meant to be heir. The child who'd nearly died in the rain was learning to be a prince. Mara descended through corridors she now navigated with confidence, passing vampires who nodded in acknowledgement rather than hunger. Word of her role had spread. The mortal who saved the heir. The human who stood witness to treason. The girl who bargained with a king and won. Her instructor waited in the training hall Vesper, surprisingly. The ancient healer had insisted on teaching Mara about vampire physiology, their strengths and weaknesses, how to survive in a world of predators. You're late, Vesper said without rancor. Dawn watch with Silas, Mara explained. Vesper's expression softened.
He needs that.
Humanity grounds him. His mother, she paused. His mother understood that balance. Half human, half vampire. He'll need to walk both worlds, like I do now.
Yes.
Though you chose it. He was born to it. Vesper gestured to the training mats. Today we discuss silver sensitivity and how to recognize early signs of bloodlust. Knowledge that may save your life. The lesson was brutal, clinical, and necessary. Mara absorbed every word, storing it alongside everything else she was learning. She'd spent years invisible because she lacked education, resources, and power. Never again. That evening, she found Kale in his study, reading correspondence by lamplight. The Southern Territories are requesting an audience, he said without looking up. They want to meet you. Me? The mortal who exposed conspiracy in the Night Court. You're becoming famous, Mara Collins. Or perhaps infamous. His lips quirked. There are ballads being written. The poor girl who called the Vampire King. Mara sank into the chair opposite him. I'm not that girl anymore. No, Kale agreed, finally meeting her eyes. You're not. That girl died in the rain. The woman who rose from that death is something the supernatural world hasn't seen in centuries. Human but not helpless. Mortal but not weak. You're changing the balance. Is that dangerous? Everything worthwhile is. He set down his papers. But you knew that when you chose to stay. Through the window, the city sprawled below. The laundromat where her old life ended. The alley where everything changed. The streets she'd once walked invisible and forgotten. Mara thought of that rain-soaked night. Of a dying boy and a desperate phone call. Of the moment she'd decided to help instead of walking away. That choice had unmade her.
And remade her.
She was no longer poor. She wore silk and silver now. No longer invisible. Vampires bowed when she passed. No longer powerless, she held the trust of a king and the love of his heir. Do you regret it? Kale asked quietly. Any of it? Mara considered. The terror, the violence, the knowledge she could never unknow, the world she could never leave. No, she said finally. I don't. Because the truth was simple. She'd been dying slowly in her old life, drowning in poverty and invisibility. That night in the rain, she'd been given a choice, sink or swim, fade or fight, remain nothing or become something. She'd chosen to matter, and the night court, the supernatural world, would never forget her. In the gardens below, Silas emerged into moonlight, laughing at something Vesper said. He looked up toward the study windows and waved. Mara waved back. This was her life now, her family, her purpose, and she would defend it with everything she'd become. And that's how a poor girl's phone call changed everything. What did you think? Did Mara make the right choice staying in the night court? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to tell me where you're watching from. I love connecting with you all. If you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button because tomorrow's story is going to be just as gripping. See you then, story family.